So we talked about, this is just the two markets where we think we bring, in the power grid stability side, that we think we bring tremendous value. And you know, they're not mutually exclusive. Matter of fact, the one on the bottom is going to lead to more of what's on the top. So, you know, as I talk to utilities and they're worried about renewable integration, or I talk to developers and they talk about, hey, I'm being asked to, you know, do ramp rate mitigation and that kind of stuff, I say, well, look, this is great and this is what you can do on the bottom, which is what we're trying to show here is that as a cloud comes across and you have a quick drop in power, what we can do is we can discharge. We don't have to cover all of this energy. All we're trying to do is just cover to allow the generators to have an optimal ramp rate. So you're not affecting their post-combustion controls. You're not affecting their efficiency. And then on the backside, just one second, on the backside as the sun comes back out and you have a burst of power, we can absorb enough power to once again maintain a generator's ramp rate. And what this does, and I've got a slide a little bit later, it affects how often this frequency regulation is occurring and how much of this regulation you need to buy. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides about how that's going to increase based on more of that on the bottom. Yes, sir.
So for the grid stabilization problem, how do you guys take the consideration that the battery actually has to some extent, has to do load following, right? It has to follow a profile close to the profile that you have there. How do you put that into the design?
Well,
otherwise, it's not certain that you're going to stabilize the grid, right?
So the algorithm design is based on rate of change, and that I'll probably leave it at that right now. It's not really it's not that difficult in order to do that. But I think I don't want to go too much further in that because it is what we're developing inside our control systems.
You know, there's something that it seems kind of funny about all of this is that everybody is assuming for academic purposes that they control both sides of the wire. In other words, your battery is being good to your equipment and responding to your solar cells on your side of the wire. But on the other side of the wire is another ugly, jungly world with all kinds of variation in it. And so if your battery were to stray into foreign territory, it might be taken over by other people's badness. You know what I'm saying?
I think the two questions kind of lend to each other is, hey, how do you keep from confounding the control system and you grow it to be more unstable?
Right, see, strictly from a control perspective, you've introduced a new control signal into the system. So unless you design the control signal, it's going to destabilize the system.
Well, typically, going back to this is controlled by typically a control area through an AGC signal, automatic generator control signal. And so they're looking at the system, they're deciding, do I need more power right now? Do I need to absorb some power right now? And that's done on every 4 seconds. So that's one way of doing it. This one on the bottom, and we're running into this in Hawaii, where they're saying, look, this stuff is just too crazy for us. We want you to watch what's coming out of this wind farm, and we want, on the backside, we want to see that smoothed out. That's all we want to see. We want to get it smoother. And that's the other method for doing that. So.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Okay.
Then I'll stop obsessing.
Okay.
But the thing is, the reason why I asked is because this is exogenous or outside your bar control system that's already there with the utility. So now you've got two control signals coming into the system.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm asking the question.
So this one up here is typically utility controlled or ISO controlled. And this is what we're doing with AES right now in PJM's territory. And I've got a slide coming up on that. So we'll hit it again. Okay. And then what we're seeing down here is being looked at in very high penetration areas where they're saying, look, the wind is too erratic, the power output is too erratic. We're going to curtail that power because it is too erratic, or you work on smoothing the output of that system out. And so if you could picture the wind farm and the battery system coming together, and the backside, the power coming out of that is far smoother, going into the utility system at that point. So this
Can I make sure we're real clear on this? Because I've suddenly just hit on something that really bothers me about this whole idea.
Really?
Your battery is sitting there assuming a perfect world on the utility side. The 60 cycles dead bang on, it's delivered power as desired. But if it's not, then your battery is going to be delivering out into the universe to make up the difference. How in the world,
Yeah. So let's we'll just hit this one more time, then we'll talk about it afterwards.
But are you going to answer that question?
I'm going to try.
eventually?
I'm going to try right now.
Okay.
So we'll go back to this real quickly. In this example, this is the utility system controlling the battery system. Utilities looking at their system saying, hey, my frequency is too high, my frequency is too low. Typically, they'll send a signal to a generator. I need more power, I need less power on a 4-second basis. Okay? They're going to control the battery the same way, exact same way.
So with the switch,
But it's actually a communication control is what they do.
but they're going to switch it on and off.
Switch it on and off, and they'll tell you how much to provide. Okay? The bottom one is strictly tied right to a renewable power system, looking at the power output, not the frequency, the power output of that renewable energy system, and it's going to smooth that power output. That's all it cares about, is smoothing that power output. That's the difference between those two systems you see right there. Okay. So this is going to, why frequency regulation, right? This is going to dig into it a little bit, and this is going to get down to your 60 hertz question a little bit more. And how much more time do I have? Because we've spent a lot of time on questions right here, and okay, good. So, first of all, this is one, looking at a 60 hertz nominal signal, and just this graph on the right just blows up this extremely tight circle right here. So around 60 hertz, the world is on a stable network trying to govern right around this 60 hertz signal. And as you move away from it, just above 59, and you get a little more favor above 60, you're going to start looking at over frequency generation trip. Below load shedding, which is what they do on the island of Kauai. There's no spinning reserve there. They just start dumping load and then eventually trip off the generation, thinking that what they're getting ready to do is damage the generation. So as we zoom in on that, you see some typical AGC corrective action. Automatic generator control, that's the ISO watching over the system, automatically saying, wait a second, I need a little bit more power. They send out a signal in California, they buy roughly 400 megawatts of regulation, up or down, boom, the signal goes out, the generators pick up a little bit, 4 seconds later, hey, we need a little bit more, the frequency is still deviating a little bit. Okay, now we've caught it, let's move it down. Let's take that 400 megawatts and bring it down to 350. Or let's bring it down to negative. Let's actually bring the load all the way down to 200. And that's how they're controlling that 60 hertz signal. And that's going on right now, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. Generators are being brought up or down, just balancing out the system. And on a smaller microgrid, even outside of these control areas, generators are doing that with their own regulators, right? Their own governor response and their own regulation, looking at power output. So that's great. The system's working. What the heck are we even doing here, right? Let's all go home and enjoy a long evening. Well, what's happening is there's been studies saying, well, that's great, but as we all know, driving down the freeway, if we put our foot on the gas and take our foot off the gas and put the foot on the gas and take it off, our gas mileage isn't going to be as good. We'd much rather put it on cruise control and let the car get the best gas mileage, or we have ourselves a hybrid car that uses the battery to go ahead, we're going up a hill a little bit. Let me use the battery to go up the hill. We're going down the hill. Tell you what, let's go ahead and charge the battery a little bit. And that battery can actually respond pretty quickly. And so the Pacific Northwest National Lab did a study, 2008, and they said, well, look, if we had an ideal regulation resource, it would be 100% effective. It would be, respond immediately and have all the energy in the world to do it. And they said, well, let's compare that to other types of technologies. And so they looked at what the California, this was for California. They said, let's look at the average hydro, California hydro, and that's pretty effective. I mean, that's a wall of water that you can adjust up and down pretty quickly. And they said, compared to an ideal resource, it's about 60% effective. Let's look at a combustion turbine, which is a simple cycle combustion turbine, not extremely efficient, but very fast acting. And they said, that's less than 50%, less than 40% effective compared to an ideal resource. They said, well, let's look at a steam turbine. And they said, well, steam turbines are very slow acting. How effective would that be? And they said, well, in order, let's just normalize it and say it's 100 megawatts. If I needed 100 megawatts of regulation, I'd have to ask, nearly 1,000 megawatts of steam turbines to move up in order to provide that regulation. And that's similar also with a combined cycle. So, and then the reason for the study was to compare it to energy storage. In this case, they used a flywheel to do this regulation. They said, well, by gosh, this is actually 80%, over 80% as effective as the ideal resource. And they came to the conclusion that you could replace a lot of this other regulation with fast-acting energy storage, or what they use, actually the term they use now is limited energy storage resource, LESR. You'll see that term in various papers and filings. And what they said is you could actually reduce the amount of regulation required by up to 40% in CAISO. Well, I think that's a great thing, and that's really opened up a lot of eyes in the marketplace. And I really think, just for names and people, you look at Beacon Power and Judith Judson, who's done a great job just pushing this from the FERC level and then working through all of the various control areas, regional transmission operatives and the ISOs to really open this up. And it's still an effort, we're working up at CAISO to open this up to limited energy storage resources. We're almost there. The one piece that we're really trying to get to next is, well, if we're twice as good as something like this, why are we getting paid the same? we should be getting paid twice as much, and so that's our next effort. But even up to this point, you had to be a generator with an hour's worth of energy behind at least in order to participate. FERC said no, you don't need to do that. We need to open that up to non-generator resources to be able to participate. And they weren't just talking about flywheels and batteries, but they were also talking about demand response to allow that to participate in spinning reserve, and haven't quite got to frequency regulation yet. And then, just to go down, a couple more reports that were done. The California Energy Commission, that was brought up earlier. The use of storage avoids the greenhouse gas emissions, which all goes down to running your car less efficiently. And ramping duty, on an incremental basis, storage can be up to 2 to 3 times as effective as adding a combustion turbine. And I don't think I included it, but out of, this kind of gets to it, but out of the California study, right now we're about 300 to 400 megawatts of regulation. To go to the 33% RPS, they're looking at around 1,200 megawatts of regulation to as much as 4,000 megawatts of regulation during ramping periods, during shoulder months when there isn't as much hydro, when there's a big differential between night and day temperatures, when there's a lot of dynamics to the energy system in California. And that's a big number. And that's a number that we're all paying. And that's, roughly, it's in California, it's about $20 a megawatt hour. In New York ISO, it's about $50 a megawatt hour. And as you go outside of some of these areas that use natural gas, the price even goes higher. The cost of regulation was going higher and higher along with the cost of natural gas, where in most of the control areas, PJM, MISO, and in New York, still high. It was approaching $40 to $45 to $50 a megawatt hour. That provided extremely good investment opportunities for storage to do frequency regulation. A lot of people would be very happy with the returns. Right now, the price of regulation in those areas, except for New York ISO, which is seeing a lot of investment activity, a lot of activity in storage, is in the $20 to $30 range right now. Now, we're seeing that because the cost of gas is low, and also with the recession, there's been a lot more excess capacity available right now, too, for providing regulation. But what this chart shows, and this was the NREL study for the Eastern Interconnect, and they did a similar one for the Western Interconnect, and really the KEMA study is sort of the California study of integration of resources.